let's go ahead and this time remember to turn on the music. Hello! If you guys can hear me in the voice chat on YouTube, let me know. This is testing 1 2 3. Cool. Yeah. This is Wesley from the Central Ohio Game Dev Group. Welcome to you this March 26th around 1:09 p.m. This is our usual Game Dev Meetup. We want to welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out. If you're new here today, let us know in the chat. We're happy to have you. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and switch it on over. Let's see if everybody can see me. Okay. Hey! How's everybody doing today? Cool. All right. If I'm kind of like looking this way or whatever, I'm always kind of like running some of the stream stuff. I don't know how like YouTubers do this every time. They just kind of like have a really great setup. So we're trying to play around with a lot of stuff all the time. But yeah, got a couple everybody here today. So this is really cool. Like I mentioned, my name is Wesley Adams. I'm one of the COG admins for the Central Ohio Game Dev Group, or COG. I want to welcome you on this Saturday afternoon. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're just kind of a collaboration of game developers from around the Central Ohio area. A lot of us are from Columbus, but a lot of us are even outside of Columbus, streaming in on here. Our Game Dev Meetup is usually just kind of a way for us to give everybody kind of a chance to see some updates happening within our community. It's also a great way if you want to present something, anything related to game development. Just let us know. We're here to, add that kind of content to our streams. We have someone today who's going to be talking about some really cool, like, tabletop RPG mechanics, story elements. So I'll leave that a little bit secret just for right now. And then we just want to do some updates for things coming up with our events and things kind of happening around in our neighborhood. So, first and foremost, I just want to thank everybody that's on our Discord. We actually stream, via Discord. If you haven't seen that, it's why you see that little icon down there. And we're there all the time, just kind of giving some updates and feedback. New to this month is we've got a shameless plugs text channel. Really, all that means if you have anything game development you want to share, whether it's yours or somebody else's, if it's a game release or if it's an expo or whatever it is, if you're streaming yourself as well, that's a great way to share your content. So that's something new to our Discord environment. We also have a voice channel. If you want to stream an event, if you're like doing a work in progress or you want to talk about a game or something like that, let us know. Anything game development related, we welcome you. Even if you're working on your art, you like to do games for art, you can do that. Same thing with music, same thing with designing games, whatever you want to do. We just encourage it to be game development focused. If you can, no big deal. Just as much as we can. We just want to promote you guys. So that's kind of been a big thing the last couple of months this year. We really just want to promote everybody that we can to let people like kind of get more visibility, right? Well, last weekend, which pardon my internet last weekend, but we had Caleb and Jonathan talk about the release that they had last Tuesday for The Last Sunshine Rekindled, which released on Steam on Tuesday, and we did a Let's Play on that series and just kind of played this kind of like a Bulletstorm game. It's a lot of fun. If you get a chance to try it out, it's a really cool, solid game. I'm really excited to get that release. I just posted another release in our shameless plug. So if you have something, we're always posting stuff there all the time. Talk in the general channel and all that kind of good stuff too. So since I'm kind of getting into some of this stuff, I'm going to go ahead and move into our slideshow so I can kind of show you some of those different mechanics. So let me just make sure it's all ready to go. Excuse me. All right. Sweet. Like I mentioned, we're the Central Ohio Game Dev Group, and I did a capital A for March. I always miss something. But it is March 26, 2022. Um, yeah, just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about our group. So we're a collection of game developers who want to help each other make games, and more. We collaborate with local groups like CCAD, Columbus State, OSU, and more. Um, so those are around the Central Ohio area, but we also connect and network with folks in Cincinnati, with the IGDA, International Game Developer Association chapter there, which is a really great group. And then we also collaborate with the Cleveland group, the Cleveland Game Developers group. Those are great people to network as well. And then other groups too. There's folks in Youngstown, Dayton area, any place we can kind of connect with. We just want to kind of funnel everybody together and get them talking to each other, making stuff with each other, collaborating with each other, and learning with each other. So definitely let us know if you need something. Say if you're a student, first time coming in, and if you are new to here, let us know in the chat. We'd love to just say hi and welcome you to the group. If you are a veteran, just say hi too, right? Like we always like people kind of coming back and sharing their notes and sharing their experiences too and their progress. So, uh, oh, there is something new that I am going to be posting. So it says events are all online on YouTube. That might change. So some good news for folks. That won't necessarily be the case, although that will be the goal. Okay. So we are looking to have our Let's Play series, which is the third Sunday of the month. Caleb runs that, like I mentioned last week. We had our Let's Play series with Jonathan White, and we streamed that. So basically, we tried to either get a COG game or we tried to get a genre of games and let you all vote for it. So recently, it's been a lot of COG games, which is kind of cool. Um, and then we try to showcase that, and that's all. That's always going to be online. Prototype and Play is an event that happens every second Friday. We try to align that with Franklinton Fridays from what they have in Franklinton, which is our co-working space we're partnered with is the Idea Foundry, which has a lot of things going on during that time. So we try to push it to that just as an alignment, just every second Friday from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So we try to do that and post that through. And then the GameDev Meetup is usually the last Saturday of the month, although I just found out I'm out of town and preoccupied that day, so we just do it the fourth Saturday. There's 5 Saturdays in April, so I think that'll be fine. It'll just kind of be within a week's worth of the Let's Play series. And so the Let's Play series is 2 to 4 p.m., so about 2 hours, and then the Game Dev Meetup like this it's 1 to 4 p.m., but we just kind of see how long people want to go. It's kind of a nice social event. Like I said, we do announcements and updates here. So we'll have our presentations, our announcements, and then afterwards what we do is we invite people back to Discord and get to chat and know each other. And then I kind of put in all those information and all our networks. So if you go to thecog.com, you'll see all our information. So if I actually kind of escape out here real quick. So this is our website. So pretty easy to go to. If you need more resources and information, this is a great way to learn about us. Something else I wanted to note here is there is a volunteer link. We are doing a lot of things coming up, especially as we start to hit the summertime. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to make hopefully a coordinated effort to really go in and start to reach out to those folks and talk about things that they can do to help us. So if you're interested in helping our group, we could definitely use the help. And it's all volunteer work. I don't get a paycheck for this, nor do I want a paycheck for this. I love doing this. You guys are awesome. But it's a great way to give back to the community and a great way to kind of like help everybody out. I've got some folks that I've already got, thinking about like reaching out to. So if you do get a message from me, just say yes or no. There's no obligation to. It's not a big deal if you're like, I don't have the capacity to. I'm not interested. That's totally fine. We do this for you because you guys are awesome, and we wouldn't have actually lasted this long without everybody's support and collaboration. So definitely check that out on the front page. That Discord channel, again, is at the top right corner, so you can check that out. That'll take you to a page that will link to Discord, which is a separate a desktop application. You can have it as a mobile application. And it's a great way to kind of instant message us and stream your work, or stream just to kind of talk to folks. We also have our Meetup page, which is where you may have found our event updates. We always update those the last Saturday of the month, so during this event. So keep an eye on that. We have our Facebook page, which is funny. I've got my people messaging me on that, so pardon that. But this is a great way to kind of talk to people, get updates about things coming up, events, and all kinds of good stuff. If you have something you want to post, like we just say, like just try to keep it game dev related. We'd be happy to have you. And then we have our Twitter page, which I'm trying to make a coordinated effort to do more on that. My goal is to basically, or our goal is to basically use Twitter as a way to post stuff in our announcements page on Discord and hopefully even on Facebook, if we can do that. And then basically we'll have that more active. So keep an eye on that for announcements. And then obviously our YouTube channel. You're already here, so you may already know about the YouTube channel, but we always post, we try to post our Let's Play series and our Game Dev Meetups on there, so you should see a recording later today on this if you miss it or had to jump out early or what have you. So, we have our events page, which is like a calendar of our events, which I need to update as well. But we'll get information in here. There's news, which is just kind of like a blog. There's resources. So this is a great way to kind of find information about our social networks, our information, as well as other helpful links, which if you have something helpful that you might find, like we have like Unity tutorials, because a lot of us do Unities. Working with indies is a great site. Remote Game Jobs is a great site. Global Game Jam Tools is a great way to get information about how to build games. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there. We have photos and stuff of our group, and the big one I wanted to showcase is this COGS group. So this one, we actually get this from time to time. I basically just kind of wanted to push this out when we had our GDEX Expo last year, and so now we're just basically creating a collaboration of your games. If you have a game in progress or finished, doesn't matter which, basically select this here button or this card down here, add my game, and all you have to do is fill out this form, and it just kind of gives us a little bit of information, asks us for like an image for the site and for your text and whatever, and it's a great way to post your game. And it gets sent to a spreadsheet to me, and I just check it every so often and upload it, and then work to get back with you and see if it looks okay, and then just a great way to share this with everybody. So if we're at expos, if we're sharing it with other different organizations, this is a great way to get your game out there through our networks. So yeah, just let us know, and if you do have one of these and you want to update it, just let us know and we'll update it. Just like message me on Discord, or you can email us at info@thecog.com for any questions or comments, and that goes to anybody on our team that gets connected to that. And yeah, should be pretty cool. So definitely check that out. Oh, one last thing is, any event that we have, we have this go to contact page, which is basically just kind of like, just be nice and friendly. That's just something that we always abide by. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at this, a lot of this is aligned with the IGDA code of ethics. So just try to be friendly and nice, and try to be open with folks. And then we also have our contact page, which has our information, as well as anybody else that we know. So there's a lot of folks that are connected to us. So like I mentioned, Youngstown, there's Cincinnati, there's Cleveland, and a lot of other stuff there. So if you haven't had a chance to, definitely check them out. There's a lot of other groups out there too. And yeah, just kind of want to do an overview because sometimes I don't get a chance to go over the website too much. But yeah, so there's our website. And then what I wanted to do is just kind of come back. Oops, wrong one. Go back here. Let me just double check before I move on. Oh yeah, I was talking if people had played Elden Ring yet, and some people yes. So seen a few indie reviews. YouTubers pick up Last Sunshine and play it. Impressions look positive. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for people supporting are games that are being released, like The Last Sunshine. And if you get a chance to play it, please review it. I need to do that myself. But yeah, just give your honest opinion. Let us know what you think and share it if you can. Um, but cool. All right. Um, so something that I wanted to know is, this is a little bit more information on our meetup page and our Discord, which we already talked about. There's our Discord link. Um, and actually, I'm going to do something on the fly here. Discord. There you go. More information. Whoa. Yep. So we got that. This month in April, so something we are doing that's different is we are going to be in person. So that's really great news. I know a lot of you have been waiting a long time for this. Last time we had an in-person event was last July of last year. And through a lot of conversations, we deemed it good to do a trial session. And trial doesn't really mean anything other than we're just going month to month. I mean, essentially we've been online in a trial in a sense. It's basically it's not confirmed that we're going to be in person every single event. So just kind of look at the events as you normally would with any event. Just like before you leave, make sure to look at the meetup page. Which again, that meetup page is here, meetup.com/thecog. And you'll find all our events, and they will be updated prior. But our goal is to go to the Idea Foundry. We'll have our second event. Actually, I'll just go over here. Idea Foundry will have our second event. As we'll intend to have our second event second Friday of the month at the Idea Foundry. So feel free to bring in your laptop, your tablets, your games, or whatever, or just yourselves if you just want to meet people. From 6 to 9 p.m., we'll get the pizza together. We'll get drinks and stuff. We'll work to separate them. But the biggest thing with these trials is that we're providing, and you'll see them in the meetup page. We're providing PPP equipment, so protective personal equipment. Protective equipment. So things like masks, we'll have sanitary stations, both for just wiping down things as well as items specifically for electronics, so that if you have a computer, you can wipe down your monitor or whatever. We would encourage these uses as well as social distancing, but they are not required. Really, our goal has been and always will be to work to ensure the safety of everyone's health. So that's why it's been such a challenge to meet in person. Is we're always considering month to month, like how are those things affected. There is, right now the numbers in Ohio are really good. There is, the potential of a spike coming up, as there could be any time necessarily, just on how things kind of go. We are aware of that. Watching a lot of the news from the Ohio Health Department has reassured us that those things may or may not be at risk. So we will say that if you do attend these events, just know that, and that we're doing everything we can to make these as safe as possible. And we're hoping that if we can continue, we can do more in-person events. So we're just kind of taking it one event at a time. That also, goes to say, like, just kind of be respectful. If you are meeting people for the first time, I mean, it may have been a long time since you met them, just like have fun, get to talk to them. If someone says, hey, maybe I don't want to, you know, like lick the doorknobs on the way in like I used to, right? Like that's their business. Like let them do that. Uh, but I just think the biggest thing is like we just want people to come together and have fun, right? And I think that's what's really kind of great about this group is a lot of you guys, like I mentioned before, have been super helpful, especially through this time where things have been, really challenging. Just to kind of like go month to month. It's also been really encouraging with all the support of people like working online and helping us, giving feedback to folks that are new, feedbacks to folks that are even like been with us for a long time, releasing games. It's all been great. So we're going to coordinate with that as the focus. So there's no mask requirements. There's no vaccination requirements. We always encourage those. as we feel that those can make the greatest effort. But with things being the way they are more or less in a safe environment. So, and we have noted that at any given time, through COG admins, through the Idea Foundry, or even the state level, we may have to change these recommendations and requirements if things change, right? Again, this is a trial basis, so we're playing it one event at a time. We will be posting stuff every month about in-person events versus online events, so keep posted there. So something to note, some of you may have questions with, right? So if you look at this page, we have prototype and play. So for those of you who are normally in our online event, we are still working to create an online experience for folks on Discord. So we're working to keep that there. So what we'll do is we'll probably set up a computer with a TV. At least this is what we're intending. This can change. On the prototype and play site, so we'll have people there, and then we'll have people kind of chiming in to kind of coordinate events. So if you want to present on Discord on Fridays, we're basically working to create another, like just basically collaborating online events with in-person events at this time. We'll see how that goes. And as we start to go through this, please bear with us as we try to explore this new experience, right? Because it's, I think, a lot of really interesting topics for us to discuss and interesting experiences and trying to see what works best. But our goal is to keep everybody together, right? And the more we can get cross-pollination from online to in-person people, the better. Because I know even though we have a lot of people online now, like I mentioned, like we've got 460 members on Discord through this whole thing, which is really, really awesome. That's so crazy. And then, we have a lot of folks who aren't able to make in-person events or aren't comfortable making in-person events or unable to, right, just because of time frame or whatever. We want to continue those, and we want to collaborate things. Again, we're a funnel trying to collaborate developers with each other, so that's not going away. Our goal is to keep those two. And so, like, if you have topics or thoughts on what we could do better, or if you're like, hey, I would like to try to do this, then let us know. We're always trying to accommodate to your needs. So the Let's Play event is all online, always online, so that's not going to change, that structure. And then the other question is the GameDev Meetup, which is usually online like we have here. That will be our intent is to have it at the Idea Foundry. Our goal is to, in that event, kind of like what we did last year, we kind of had a field trip, which we went to a bar arcade. This year, we're going to try to have it at the Idea Foundry and just have a social event. The great thing is that the prototype and play event will be a social event as well. All these are kind of social events, but specifically, we just want people to have a chance, if they're interested, able to meet in person. We'll do that with the GameDev Meetup and just have a social event. So if you want to come just to talk to friends you haven't talked to in a while, this is a great time to do that. If you want to showcase some work that you've been doing, this is a great time to do that as well. There won't be any official announcements or official projections, like we won't be at the grandstand at the Idea Foundry projecting stuff as our intent. This could change, but that's our intent, is just to have people have fun and socialize and network. And hopefully what we're kind of spinning around as an idea is hopefully we can have, they have like a back patio at the Idea Foundry. We're trying to have like kind of a food and barbecue there outside, so that could even make things a little bit more comfortable. So it's a quote unquote outside event. There's land grant out there by the back, so if you guys want to grab a beer, if you're obviously old enough to, you can do that. We'll also have like food and drink there, hopefully like a barbecue. So thinking of like hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff like that. And if you guys wanted to bring stuff, we would say that's fine too. And then again, same thing. We're going to have masks if you want them. We'll try to keep things clean and wipe down if you need to, and just kind of go from there. And we'll talk about the Idea Foundry's events too, because they're ramping up again, because things are opening up again. So there's a lot coming through there. So we'll give you guys announcements as you go. I will tell you. And I guess since you don't really need to see anything, I will tell you that our Idea Foundry has gone through some changes, just for some of you who knows. But the good thing is the changes aren't really anything that will impact anything we normally would understand, and really honestly hasn't really impacted a lot of things other than just like a change of hands. So right now, if you guys are familiar with the Franklinton area, there's two other like apartments and co-working spaces called Gravity 1 and Gravity 2. So those have kind of been building up. If you weren't kind of jumping around the Franklinton area, you may not even know these. Maybe you saw them last time you were there, but they now actually are partnering and working with the Idea Foundry to do bigger and better things, like work with them to do workshops on building apartment equipment. So we actually had a town hall meeting where Alex Bandar from the Idea Foundry actually did a big talk on this, as well as Ben, who does a lot of event coordination, talked about all the really cool stuff coming in. So definitely check him out. And let me see if I can actually grab that link. Columbus Idea Foundry. So if you get a chance to definitely check them out. They have some new stuff kind of coming up. And they always have like, if you want to be a member, they have a co-working space membership. They also have, I want to say that they have their co-working space membership up too, but I don't quote me on that. But they're opening up. They had to close down a lot of the stuff due to mandates. They had offices during the time the last couple of years, but a lot of the events, like ours, for example, weren't able to be hosted just because the amount of people that would be there. They had co-working spaces, or excuse me, office spaces were fine because a lot of times they were separated. But things like big classrooms or whatever weren't able to do them because they had too many people at that time. So now that they're starting to open up, these things can start to open up. So definitely keep an eye on those that website and their information, and we'll keep you updated too. So definitely check them out. If you want to check out their classes, I think they're doing them at a kind of like what we're doing in a trial basis. We're just starting small and just kind of adding them as they need to. But definitely support them. They support us. They're always happy to have us there. So if you get a chance to, definitely check out their events and their classes and just kind of co-working space and get to chat with them for a bit. So, let me make sure I got anything else. So I'm going to switch back over here. And let me double check before I get too ahead of myself. If there's any questions. Yeah, I'm going to be all up in their businesses, hugging handshakes and everything. Yeah, it'll be good to see people. Definitely ask. I know it's kind of a bit of a joke, but definitely ask before you do. I mean, some people may not want that. Maybe they do. I met a friend of mine that, and I was totally fine with it. He gave me a hug, and I was like, it was great. So yeah, definitely be a really great time. Yeah, doorknob lickers. Yeah, I know who, right? That's always my joke. Yeah, so it should be good. I'm really excited. Definitely share the news that we're going to be in person for the prototype and play and for the GameDev Meetup. Definitely tell them to check out meetup.com/the COGG for all our events, because those will be updated in real time. So before you go out, and we'll work to make this message on our Discord, on our Facebook page, and all that stuff before the event. So definitely check us out before you go, but we're like 90% sure that it's going to be all in person, all kind of how you normally would have gone to those, with a collaboration on online information too. So the prototype and play, we'll try to cross-stream Discord with that, with our in-person event, and even the Game Dev Meetup, we're going to try to stream just so people can see it. They actually have cameras at the Idea Foundry that they're trying out to do online streaming, so we're going to try to do that. No guarantees, but definitely check us out if you can. If you can make it, great. If not, again, we're going to try this month to month to see what makes sense as we start to evolve things. But cool. Good stuff. I can kind of talk about that all day. If you have any questions, feel free to email us or message us on Discord. And happy to answer any questions or gather any comments if you have comments too. So we've got a presenter today, but before we get into that, I wanted to do some GDEX updates. So let me see if I can go there. All right. So those of you who didn't know, we have a game expo every year called GDEX. It's just a Game Developer Expo. We are now partnered with Origins Games Fair, which is more of the tabletop card game, role-playing game, which actually fit really nicely with our talk today with Lucas, which I'll get to here in just a sec. But just so you know, that's happening June 8th through the 12th. It's a collaboration of our digital games, and even if you have like a game that you're working on, even that's a card game, we're accepting, where we got badges open now, but we also are accepting exhibitors, and we are accepting speaker applications. So if you're interested, I don't know why this is. Let me just double check. Yeah, he's changed. If you want to become an exhibitor, all you have to do, we got to update the site. It looks like that might have got changed through another change. But if you go to the Apply tab at the top, there's the exhibitor button. This will take you to the exhibitor page, which you can apply now, and all that good stuff. So you got all our booth information here. And I will note based on thorough discussions, we are requiring vaccinations this year. That is an evolving note in some instance, but if you are exhibiting, you will be required to be vaccinated. I want to say that is also for attendees, and this is just a group collaboration note for you know the Greater Columbus Convention Center with the Origins Games Fair and with the exhibitors. So if you can, great. Do that beforehand. You still have time. If not, then that's what we're going to have to require. And we're not the only ones. I know PAX is doing this. I think GDC is doing this, but don't quote me on that. But a lot of exhibitors or a lot of expos have been doing this for a while, and we just figured it would be the safest way to present this. I know last year we had just masks, but just know that we're trying to keep everybody's safety in consideration. And I know that I've just said like, hey, we're not doing that for our group, but I know that when you're talking about 10,000 people, it's a bigger pool of folks that need to have a higher concern, right? So I wasn't necessarily part of those conversations, but I'm happy to guide you to folks who can talk more about it if you have questions about that. But just know that that is information to kind of keep in mind. Yeah, we're going to play that year to year. That may not be next year. We'll just see how it goes. But again, just please be patient with us. We're just always trying to keep these things as less impactful on you as possible, but also as fun and engaging as they always have been. But it will be a transitional period to a certain degree. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, definitely check out. You can email us, in this contact forum, and we'd be happy to kind of talk with you more. So, but yeah, so good information there. And then what I want to talk about specifically is, and volunteers are coming. So those of you who want to volunteer, that is coming soon. We have a couple more questions with Origins to kind of confirm that stuff, and that should be coming in within hopefully a couple weeks, if not this week. So keep you posted on that. But the big thing I wanted to showcase is that we are soon, and this isn't updated, so I got to update this, but we're soon doing the GDEX Game Jam. So those of you who don't know what a game jam is, it's a time period collaboration event where you get to make games with other people. And this is, you can do one person, you can do a group of people. We're a pretty flexible game jam, and most of the time these game jams are usually like a, weekend event, so 48 hours. Ours tends to be 9 days, give or take, because what we try to do is make it casual, right? We don't want people to feel pressured in making a game, although 9 days is still not a lot of time to make a game, but it's a lot more time to kind of if you don't happen to work on the game for a day, that's okay, it's not a big deal. But it gives you more flexibility, and for people that are more busy on the weekends, they can do it during the weekday. If they're busy on the weekday, they can do it on the weekends. And what we do is kind of in years past, we've hosted everything through we'll have our landing page here, which this dates aren't correct. I got to update that. But usually we host everything through our Discord channel and then upload games through this channel. Usually is our itch.io page, which allows us to upload our games at the end. And throughout the event, we'll be talking to you about all kinds of things GDEX related, as well as getting you opportunities to get feedback from game developer professionals. And then the goal is at the end, we kind of do like a group participant judging session, as well as we invite professionals that have been kind of with us throughout the weekend to give their judging 2 cents, and we kind of nominate kind of like a best of show or a best of game jam, right? It doesn't mean this is like a competition. It just means like, we're just trying to get people to have fun and have a chance to showcase that. Say, hey, last year was, nominated as, the best in show. So yeah, definitely check that out. We're gonna post it out pretty soon. And the date for that will be, it's in May, and it'll be the weekend of May 13th through the end of the day on Sunday 22nd. And we decided to do that because the next weekend is Memorial Day weekend. So we're going to start that Friday the 13th of May through Sunday the 22nd. And it'll be a lot like last year. So if you've done that in years past, that'll be a lot like what you've kind of already seen there. And basically, we'll get you into teams. You can come with a team if you like. You don't have to. We'll start to break you up and make sure that at least each group, as best we can, will have like a technical person, like a programmer, an artist, a musician, and if anybody else who is specifically or not specifically designing the game would be designers. So we'll coordinate those efforts and guide you, and we'll have a theme this year that you'll loosely base your game off of, however you want to interpret that. And it will be a lot of fun. You'll get to meet new people, you'll get to collaborate with people, and then we'll have usually Tom, who works with me on other projects, and I usually kind of run the event, and usually get some other COG people in there as well. But we'll be coordinating the event all week, and checking in with folks, guiding people, answering questions. So it'll be a lot of fun. If you kind of want to know what it's like to work in a game industry environment, game jams are a really great way to do that. So definitely check it out if you're interested. It's a really low commitment. I hate to say that there is commitment, right? You do want to help work with your team, but it's like a lot of time to work on it. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. So game jams are a great way to have, a game that you make without like all the consequences of like, oh, I spent all this time, put it up on the store, and it cost me this much money. It is a free event. It doesn't cost you anything, just some time and your coordinated effort to work with other people. And we'll be here to help you all every step of the way. So had a lot of fun, and all the games that we showcased, we put up at the GDEX Expo. So we'll promote that on our webpage. So you'll get all kinds of people coming in, seeing your games and having fun and checking them out after the event. Or excuse me, during the event of GDEX, which will be on June 8th through the 12th. So this year it's actually, usually with Origins it's a couple days, and we've kind of coordinated with that as well. So we'll have a lot of really good stuff there. So more stuff is coming out. We'll soon get a schedule. Once we kind of fine tune our speakers and our events and stuff. So more to come with that. So definitely check us out and let us know if you have any questions. So let me just double check. Anybody coming in if they have any questions? Yeah, and if this doesn't happen, if you guys have questions, and you want to talk about it in Discord later or in the chat later, let me know. I'd be happy to answer anything best I can. So, cool. All right, so I think I did enough blabbering. Sorry to talk everybody's heads off. So we'll kind of get into our talk today. So today we actually have a really cool thing with Lucas Zellers, like I mentioned before. He's actually done a couple of projects or worked with teams in tabletop role-playing games. So he's got a lot of really great information. He's going to talk to us today on the topic of making monsters that matter. And that specifically to Dungeons and Dragons and other games you might be making. So this will be a pretty cool event. So let me go ahead and see if he's available. Oh, and something else to note as I'm kind of doing this, if let me just ask, you ready? Cool. So as I'm saying this, something else I always like to do is after the event, we have a question of the month, which I was just kind of make up on the fly. If you have something you want to showcase, that's fine too. But the question is, what tools and design practices do you use to prototype and build your games? So if you have something like, hey, I know Hex or Jonathan from uh, the Last Sunshine actually told us about this like web map ideation tool that he uses, and it's I have to remember what it's called. All right, my audio went out for a sec. Yay! Sorry about that. But yeah, Hex told us about this mind mapping tool, which I might share. But yeah, if you got some tools that you like to use, or if you have any ideas of like best practices, like how do you approach like an RPG game, or just kind of detailing out your game design document, these are things that would be great to talk about today. So or anything, and basically we'll jump in our Discord channel. Again, I'll post that at the end of the stream today. But definitely join us in the general voice channel on our Discord, and we'll be happy to kind of just catch up with folks and hang out till whenever. Usually it's until 4, but we may spend that all time. Maybe we'll spend the whole time doing that. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll play a game. I don't know. We'll see. But we'll have fun there. But without further ado, I wanted to bring in Lucas for today and chime him into our channel. So let me go ahead and switch over to that. Actually, give me one moment. Let me just check something real quick. Yeah, cool. All right. And sorry for the dizzying effect. Oh, sorry. Give me one moment. I swear I'm almost there. And this will be this one. There you go. Hello, Lucas.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Double check. Talk again.
All right, hello.
Yes.
I have joined
Hopefully.
the live room.
Yeah, like in theory, they should see you or hear you. They see you. I see you. But yeah, welcome, Lucas. He actually talked to me like a couple weeks ago about this topic, and I was asking like, hey, does your group actually do um, tabletop games, card games, all that kind of stuff? Like, actually, interestingly enough, like we do, although a lot of us tend to be programmers and technical designers and developers. Um,
Yeah, I felt a little bit outmatched because I'm none of those things.
I
I'm
know.
not an artist or a coder, but so I was like, "Hey, can I be a writer too and pretend like what I do is valuable?"
Oh
So,
yeah. No,
yeah,
no,
I gotta
100%. Yeah, we do have those folks as well, as we do have artists and designers and all that good stuff. And we've actually had a couple people who even in GDEX last year that were showing some of their card games that they make and showcase every week at like prototype and play. So yeah, we encourage that, and partly like I was explaining to Lucas, is a lot of these games can be uh, originally tabletop games, and you can evolve them to a digital game, or you can not. I mean, maybe you can just
yeah.
move them through. But I think game design is not limited to the final output. I think they can kind of share a lot of things. So I think it's going to be a really interesting topic today, as it attains to monsters and villains, or monsters and games, and how to make them interesting and fun. So what I want to do is let you kind of drive a little bit, Lucas, since I've talked too much, and talk a little bit about yourself, and then talk about what you're showcasing today, and then we'll have your presentation stream. So I'll let you kind of take over.
Lovely. Give me just a second to make sure I can hide my presenter view.
Yeah, that was one thing. We're always some kind of technical thing. Um, but we figured it out. So.
Oops. Oh.
Yeah, Caleb was like, I was worried it was the internet again. I'm like, hopefully not. Knock on wood, man.
There it is.
I'm connected through a physical Ethernet cable today, so I'm hoping that everything's fine. I haven't had any issues today, so, but we'll see. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. I appreciate everybody's like patience, as we sometimes have. I mean, that's just how it is with streaming. Sometimes your internet goes down, and what are you gonna do? But yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Did I do it?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So great. Thanks for the introduction, Wesley. By the way, if you want to ask questions at any point during this conversation, I'd love to get to know you guys and hear a bit more about what you're working on and how what I'm talking about relates to it, because I'm still getting a handle on that. So I've got the YouTube. I've got the YouTube live over here on my screen. If you drop questions in the comments, I'll be able to see them. But yeah, I want to talk to you about making monsters that matter, lessons from D&D, because I have been in this space. I've been working on Dungeons and Dragons on a professional or semi-professional basis for about 4 years now. And my particular area of interest, the thing that I'm almost willing to say I specialize in, is the angle of monsters, because I think it's the thing that one of the things that makes D&D as a system unique, and it's one of the things that tends to draw people in more quickly than anything else. I know it was for me. I think my first exposure to Dungeons and Dragons was finding one of the original monster manuals and trying to figure out what in the world I was looking at with these sort of splodgy ink illustrations of displacer beasts and beholders and mind flayers and so on. And I was hooked from day one. So I've been, well, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and what I do, because that is a difficult question to answer. I did meet someone from a college student, actually, who was interested in the same kind of gaming space and was getting really into Dungeons and Dragons. And then I told him, what I do for a living. And I usually do it by time spent. So there's like 6 things I have going on at any given moment. And I imagine this is pretty familiar to you guys who are, if you're on a part-time or freelance basis or trying to move yourself in that direction. I spend my day job as a digital marketer and a teacher, and I also am a grad student and a podcaster and a freelance writer. And so that's kind of how my time is broken up, and that's what I told him. And he said, "Wow, that sounds great. That's exactly what I want to be when I grow up." And I wish I could have showed him this graph of how much those things impact my life by money earned, because the interesting parts to him, like, yeah, I noticed sleep doesn't appear. I'm being a little bit generous in the way that I'm breaking this out. I've also just noticed that I put author and freelance writer on there twice, so those are perhaps the same thing. But yeah, the point that I desperately wanted to both tell and hide from him was the fact that the interesting parts to him were the ones that absolutely do not make you most of your money. So, but they are the things that have been some of my most fulfilling experiences over the last few years. And it's been a path to publishing for Dungeons and Dragons that began in, I don't know, probably about 2016 when I first picked up the game in its 4th edition. And I wanted to just walk through this a little bit to show you how I have created the living in Dungeons and Dragons that I have, with the caveat that everyone's path to success in their career is different, and that what worked for me starting in 2016, 2018 may not work for you starting in 2022. But I want to show you just a little bit about this kind of culture of game development that has appeared along with 5th edition, and that can and does, I think, coincide with developing for computer games and that part of the field. So we're going to talk about this in terms of how I leveled up. So these are my class features for D&D. First of all, 5th edition had a huge cultural ascendance beginning in about 2014. 2011, the game's 4th edition came out, and the first actual play podcast appeared. I believe it was Acquisitions Incorporated, which was sponsored by Wizards, featured one of their lead designers, Chris Perkins, and the guys from Penny Arcade. I'm sure you guys know about this if you've been to PAX. Since then, it has exploded. And I have some of the numbers here. In 2019, there were 40 million fans all over the world, 17.5 billion media impressions, plus 59% viewership on YouTube, and more importantly, or maybe more importantly to you, 4.3 billion minutes watched on Twitch. I should also mention the record-breaking Kickstarter by Critical Role, and a D&D campaign is now a fully produced and animated cartoon that just happened in somebody's basement. So there is an incredible amount of cultural energy and money and economic power behind Dungeons and Dragons in 5th edition. And that's kind of where I started to come along with it. The other really cool thing that happened when 5th edition came along was the open game license. And there's a fascinating publication history that Dungeons and Dragons has, going back to first edition and Pathfinder and how those were split. But one of the really smart decisions they made was to license the core components of the game almost as open source software. So you can get, here are the most basic of character features and spells and beasts and monsters. The absolute bare minimum rock bottom that you need to run this game, you can have for free. And then you can innovate on that and create your own things. And it has created this bizarre melting pot of third-party publishers for Dungeons and Dragons. I came in on one of this ecosystem's online marketplaces, the DMs Guild. My first adventure was released in 2018, and it has since sold, I think, about 1,500 copies. The real innovation there was making it replayable, so that you could learn to run it once and then run it over and over again for different groups of people. There are people who make their entire living, or I would say a good chunk of it, on the DMs Guild. I've seen figures of about $1,100 a month, or higher in the top sellers. I'm not there yet, but I'm hoping to get there. And there, I used the DMs Guild in these sort of places like DriveThruRPG and itch.io as kind of a stepping stone to podcasting. That was how I started to build my network. I wanted to meet these people. I wanted to talk about how they made monsters and what they put into their games, and why in the world is a Medusa and a Gorgon different things, and how do we sort of track the history of these things through time. That network led to a lot of opportunities working on Kickstarter projects. So at this point, I have a pretty... At this point, I have a body of work on projects that have made anywhere from about $4,000 up to $750,000. And I don't want to be misleading about those numbers, because that's the total Kickstarter thing. But this is the kind of work that I'm finding as a writer for games. That whole body of work has taught me something about the way that we make monsters that I really wanted to bring to COG, because I want to see if this transfers. And I want to give you the benefit of about 2 years of work interviewing game designers on the monsters that they make and how to get the most out of their villains. That's what I've been doing on my podcast, Making a Monster. And I guess we have to do like rock bottom, bare minimum speech class stuff and define what a monster is. The problem is that's incredibly difficult. If you ask seven different people what monster means, you'll get 8 definitions. And I know that's true because I've done it.
The simplest definition of a monster is it's a large, dangerous entity that is in some way not human.
I have some favorite monsters in 5th edition, but the ones that I enjoy playing are the ones who think they're doing the right thing. So to them, they're the heroes. But to everybody else, they're the monster.
I mean, we know who our monsters are personally in our personal life. So for me, what a monster is someone or something doing harm with purpose, at least in my games. Like, that could still be an aboleth, or it could be some form of monstrous creature, but like, in my opinion, they still have agency. Like, they had a chance to not do the thing they're doing now, and they chose to do it anyway.
I would say more that monster being antagonists that you're not going to have a conversation with. You got me thinking about my own biases now. Why aren't you having a conversation with them? Why aren't you trying to?
Villains don't think they're villains, is the thing. And so you're watching someone who, in some ways, you can sympathize with because, you know, the evil queen was just someone who was wronged and thinks that she deserves whatever it is she's trying to get.
In Float City, the emissary. That, to me, is a monster. It doesn't have a human shape. It is monstrous. It is a thing that is horrific. It causes terror. It is something that is, until you see it, somewhat beyond the ken of the human mind. I think a villain is something that plots. A villain is at the top of a pyramid that your players work towards.
Already got another definition in the chat. A monster is a creature that won't get me arrested for murder if I kill and loot it. And that's actually a really great point because we make the monsters are the things that it's okay to kill. So you heard the voices of James Mendez-Hodes. He's a New York City-based game designer and sensitivity consultant. Nikki Yeager of Beholder to No One. Several other podcasters, Dan Locke from the last Tapestry, Andrew Coons from the First Watch, and Mike Rignetta from Fun City. The thing that we kind of came to in those interviews was trying to figure out this overlapping Venn diagram of monster, antagonist, and villain. And it's never just as simple as the one being the other. So I wanted to take a look at what these would mean in terms of game design. First of all, they're if you look at the Extra Credits YouTube channel, which I'm sure you have, and if you haven't, I can highly recommend them. They had a framework of understanding monsters in terms of game design as either mechanics villains or narrative villains. So mechanics villain would be characters created to drive play. These are your Bowsers, your Koopas, your Ganons. These are, when you meet and conquer these monsters, they're meant to be a feat of gameplay prowess that lesser players could never achieve, sort of giving you the satisfaction of being really good at pushing Q at the right time. Narrative villains, by contrast, are villains that have a story or villains that are meant to engage you in this sense of plot and narrative. And you have to answer 3 questions for every narrative villain. What do they want? How do we know that they want that and that it's okay to murder and loot them? I call that the kick the dog moment. You'll see this you'll see this in movies. Like when you introduce the hero, he does something heroic. And then when you introduce the villain, he does something villainous so that we know these are the guys and these are how we are meant to relate to them. And then you have to know, how do these two people relate? Why is it that what the villain wants and what the hero wants can't coexist? Dungeons & Dragons is really good at doing narrative villains. It gives you the idea that every villain you fight is going to be a narrative villain. It is literally someone that you can talk to. There's nothing, no programming, no invisible wall, no texture, no cutscene that is going to prevent you from talking to anything and everything that you encounter in Dungeons & Dragons. So there's this impression that every villain in D&D is a narrative villain, when in fact, the villains in Dungeons & Dragons, the monsters, to borrow their term, have to be mechanics villains as well. At some point, there has to be something that you can use your good class feature on. And usually it's goblins. Usually those are the things that you hit and they explode into coins, or orcs, or sort of things that we can that we can murder hobo and feel okay about it. And all of those are okay ways of playing the game. The problem comes in when you don't know which one is which. A monster is never just a monster. D&D has D&D has this idea that D&D is able to introduce you to monsters on a really personal basis, and that gives you the opportunity to explore them with a lot of depth. When you do that, you realize that a lot of monsters carry associations that have been attached to them over time through history. Orcs are a really great example. I don't like to think of them this way, but I think that orcs are goblins, but with racism. They tend to get attached to them physical characteristics that were associated with races that experienced discrimination. So I talked to Mendez about it. And this is what he told me.
The most important point that I could make about orcs is that if we sit down to play a role-playing game, and the way that the game or the other players or the DM, that someone involved portrays orcs, reminds me a little bit too much of the way it feels when I and my friends experience racism in the real world, then I have a hard time enjoying the game.
It's a hard move, a hard truth to come to terms with, but it does carry the point that you have to think deeply about your monsters, because the stakes are pretty high. Part of that, just to give you one more example of how powerful and and historically prevalent some of this is, I want you to meet Dagon. I'm going to run through this really quickly because I know that I am pushing my time here. But in 5th edition, Dagon appears as one of the Lords of the Abyss, a demon prince of hell. In previous editions, he had been portrayed somewhat differently. In the way that he came to D&D from H.P. Lovecraft, whose first story, I think it was 1919 or 1920, was simply titled Dagon, and did the classic Lovecraft thing of exploring this encounter with a being so vastly beyond our understanding that it drove one insane simply to comprehend it. Very, very cosmic horror of him. And I thought, when I was reading about Dagon, that was it. I could not have been more wrong. In fact, Dagon appears in several places in the Bible itself, leading back to the Old Testament. Most notably, he was a deity he was worshipped by the Philistines, and his was the image that fell on its face when the Ark of the Covenant was carried into the Philistine camp. Dagon was associated with ideas of chaos and the abyss and the sea, associations that he still carries to this day, which appear in some of the earliest passages of Scripture. Some of the passages about the origin of the world itself, in which God separated the sea and the chaos from the land and the order, the victory of divine reason over chaos. When you encounter a monster, Dagon or other, it is entirely possible that what you are dealing with is a symbol that goes back to the very beginning of our understanding of time itself. The stakes are as deep as they are high. And I kind of wanted to... I was talking to Kieran Suckling, who's the founder and executive director of the Center for Biological Diversity. He had a really good way of explaining how this works.
That's exactly how language and culture works. It's this ever-changing, ever-evolving thing that just works by mixing things together. That's exactly what it is. It's a mixing together, which is very interesting in terms of that happens very slowly and sort of organically with many, many different people accidentally contributing over time, so that we end up with a certain perception of a species, a name, etc. So it's intriguing to me to think about that in terms of someone sitting down today and saying, okay, I will myself create a monster, right? I'm going to compress what would normally be thousands of years of work, thousands of people accidentally contributing. I'm now going to do that. And so what does that look like? And how is what you think you're doing as my unique individual, in fact, probably not exactly so much, because you're carrying all these sensibilities with you, and it only works coherently in a limited way. Like as a game maker, I'm sure you know, you can't just randomly make up any rules you want. That would be a really crappy game, right? You make up the rules, but the rules have to interplay in certain coherent ways to make it a good game. And it's the same thing, I think, with creating monsters, and also the bigger cultural long-term development of language and how we think about these species.
I want to be careful because I don't feel qualified, and I certainly don't have the time to address exactly how to navigate the conversation of cultural appropriation and representation in gaming. But I do want to tell you, or I think it is valuable for you to know from me, that one of the focal points of that conversation is your monster. It's the villain in your game. It's the enemy other that you have created and symbolized. So there are, if you want to get deeper into that and how that works, I can recommend, again, James Mendez-Hose. He's done a lot of work on this subject, and there's a growing body of scholarship and conversation about it. Some of which is represented in Making a Monster. So if you want to go back and see some of the work that I've done or done on this conversation, it's in the podcast feed. One particular example that I wanted to bring up is the intersection of monsters and natural history. So a lot of our monsters, rather than coming from cultural conversations or associations, come to us from historical or biological associations. You might have seen this guy. There's if you're a Ray Harryhausen fan, like we've had Cyclops in myth for a very long time, and they're a pretty good stock monster to use. There is a growing idea now that the original concept for a Cyclops came from something like this. This is a cast of a mastodon skull that is in the Hefner Museum of Natural History at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. That central orifice in the center of the skull is actually where the nostrils are, and the eyes are down there on the side. You can see one of them on the left. But if you had never seen an elephant before, or if you didn't have a background in anatomy or functional anatomy, you would probably assume that was where the eyeball was supposed to be, and then assume that, okay, the skull is this big, the person to which it belonged was probably at least 15 feet tall, and boom, now we have a Cyclops. Another great example would be the griffin itself. This is kind of the head and wings of an eagle, and then the back half of a lion. Adrienne Mayer, in her book, The First Fossil Hunters, proposed the idea that griffins were based on the fossils of Protoceratops, this beak-faced dinosaur that was prevalent in what is now the Gobi Desert. So that people who went to the Gobi Desert asked the natives or the natives who lived in the Gobi Desert would have seen these fossils, and them being falconers primarily, would have looked at that and said, oh, that's a bird, but it's a big one, and it's got lion feet. I don't know where the wings are. It doesn't matter. And over time, it turns into a griffin. So a lot of the history that comes into your monsters is from just the natural world and the ways in which you can use that. So it's not always a fraught conversation where you get your monsters. You can take inspiration from everywhere and recognize that every monster we have is a little bit of a remix from something that we have met or encountered in the real world. My particular inspiration from this was from extinct animals. I wanted to find a way of talking about extinction that gave us a way of that wasn't necessarily maudlin or pessimistic or defeatist. So I was looking at some of the stories of animals that have gone extinct. I wanted to be able to tell those stories again, to do that process that Karan described of bringing them to life as monsters. This is my thylacine, my Tasmanian tiger. It was called the ghost tiger because of how elusive it was, how difficult it was to discover, and how well the Tasmanian bush forest land protected it. So it was no great leap to turn a thing called the ghost tiger into a ghost tiger. And that is one of the great joys of that we have as game designers, is being able to mythologize the things that we discover. One other example is the passenger pigeon. There used to be billions of these in North America, literal billions. They lived on beech nuts and acorns that were just massed fruiting in the forests of pre-settlement America. And the last one died in the Cincinnati Zoo in, I think it was 1914. We went from billions to one. And that idea of billions of them sort of moving with a singular mind exists in Dungeons and Dragons already. It's called swarm mechanics. So again, there wasn't a lot of very great leaps it wasn't a very great leap to bring either of these things into Dungeons and Dragons already. So now what? what do we do? What do we do with this kind of definition of monster? And of course, we have not been able to get through this conversation without my HVAC kicking on. So if the audio quality has gone down, I apologize. I want to give you 5 things to know that if you haven't taken away anything else from this conversation, here are some things to keep in mind. First of all, never use a mechanics villain when you need a narrative villain. If your game is constructed in such a way that you want to have you want deep engagement with the themes and the morals and the ideas of what the protagonist represents, don't put him up against something that you jump on his head and he turns into a coin. Make those values match. Second, strengthen the narrative of every villain. We live in a world in which media properties are subjected to scrutiny they were never meant to withstand. There is someone out there who's going to make a 2-hour video essay about a kids show with no more depth than a puddle on the street. It will happen. And I think you can see that in the difference between season 1 villains and season 2. Like if you watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, there's a huge difference between Ozai and every single villain that Korra fought. So think about the narrative of your villain, even if it is something that you jump on their head, because someone else will if you don't. Thirdly, communicate your monsters efficiently. If you're writing for Dungeons and Dragons, I have maybe 1,000 words to tell the story of the thylacine or the passenger pigeon, and there simply is not enough room to put in everything that I would love to talk about. So you have to write and rewrite until everything that your players need to know about your monster is obvious and clear and efficiently stated. Fourthly, know the deeper history of your monster. Don't go in blind. If you're not prepared to talk about feminine representation, maybe don't use a Medusa in your game. If you're not prepared to talk about themes of greed or capitalism or any of the many other things that a dragon might represent, don't put a dragon in your game. Be careful. The effort that you invest up front is worthwhile. It pays off in the end. And finally, write for TTRPGs. There are a lot of ways for you to do this. It is a really low-cost way of prototyping your game, of balancing mechanics, of getting people familiar with your setting and seeing what people resonate with and what they like and what they really enjoy. And there are a lot of ways to do that that can build your skill as a game designer, as a narrative designer, and build the audience around the game that you're building. So yeah, that's me. If you want to know more about what I'm doing, you can check out the Book of Extinction. It's coming to Kickstarter in 2022. That's the thylacine on the cover. I've also got the dodo and the great auk, the aurochs and the cladoceros here. And those are just 5 of, we're shooting for 70 or more of these kind of stories in the book. And you can check it out at scintilla.studio/extinction. I'll back it up to here. Well, actually, are there any questions in the chat that we want to get into? By the way, thank you for reminding me of entelodonts or hell pigs. I never cease to be surprised at the things that people will dig up. I've been working on this book for about a year now, about 15 months, I think, actually, and I'm still finding new extinct animals that would be amazing D&D monsters. Oh yeah, Godzilla is a really great example of how a monster is never just a monster. If you watch Pacific Rim, 2013's greatest case of cinematic honesty there ever was, Guillermo del Toro's adaptation of the kaiju genre of film, those are hurricanes. They show up out of the ocean. It's always raining when you see them. They have categories 1 to 5. And Godzilla was kind of the same way. Every kaiju is a natural disaster. He's a nuclear-powered lizard that lays waste to Tokyo. So in Japan, nuclear power makes monsters. In America, nuclear power and radiation makes superheroes. It's almost like we have entirely different cultural associations and histories with nuclear power.
Well, it's interesting because I know I purposely or accidentally posted a cultural appropriation, but I think what it comes down to, and you see this in a lot of different works of fiction, or just narratives or what have you, is a lot of times when you're telling a story or trying even to make a game, you want to invite the viewer or the player in to your experience, right? So it's a part of a little bit of what you know and a little bit of what you don't know. That keeps it kind
Yeah.
of interesting because you're like, oh, I know about that. Well, what if this happened? Like, oh, that'd be really cool. Like, and I think that's why, like, I think this book is great. It's that the animals that actually existed, almost immortalized through literature and narratives. So it's kind of like, well, what if this creature ended up being this archetype? It's like I remember was playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, and they were
Mm-hmm.
I forget what it was called, but it was basically a forest spirit that was kind of the protector of nature. Integrated into the game, you can ride it. There's horses that you can ride in the game. This one you can ride, but you can't tame it. Like you can't saddle it to different locations and come back to
Yeah,
it
yeah.
later. But the idea is that it's like not meant to be tamed. It was kind of like a god and a protector of all the animals in the world of Breath of the Wild, and it was kind of a homage to a natural forest spirit in I think Japanese folklore that also gets shown up in movies like Princess Mononoke, like the god spirit in that.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
again, it's a little bit what you know and a little bit what you don't know. It's kind of makes it interesting. Like,
Hmm.
I never seem to think about that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really
Monsters are a way
fascinating.
of monsters are a way of putting a handle on issues that we couldn't talk about before. Like it would be really difficult to talk about Japan's relationship to the nuclear bomb, but it's much, much, much easier to talk about Godzilla.
Yeah.
So every monster is a way of putting language to a thing that we didn't know how to talk about before. Which is the other great gift of being a game designer or a narrative designer, right? Is being able to put these complex issues into terms that we can understand, or mechanics that represent what it actually was. I love things like that when the way that you interact with something in a game tells you something about what it was in real life or what it represents.
Yeah, and I think you kind of were answering a question I was going to ask, which is why even have monsters or villains in your games or stories anyways? And I think
Yeah,
that's part of it.
yeah, that's a huge part of it. I don't think every game needs a monster. I think I do have to say that at this point. There have been a lot of games. I think Journey was sort of the first example
Right.
that that didn't have a monster at all, or it was just sort of the kind of walking simulator thing. And
Was
there's an audience for that.
yeah.
But monsters have that ability to be something more than what they are, and
Because they do provide a purpose, right? And
mhm.
that's what's kind of neat about them. And I mean, obviously they provide a purpose, but their purpose is pretty powerful
Yeah,
versus like, hey, in a tabletop role-playing game, you need to have 3 dice. Like maybe that's
mhm.
important, but maybe it doesn't
Yep,
matter if you have 3 dice or 5 dice or no dice at all. You could just have cards.
right.
Whereas monsters kind of play a role as a lot of different things. It can be a greater understanding of the characters themselves as they go through the journey and overcome these monsters. It could be, just adding in a better understanding of the world that you're invited into. It could
Hmm.
be just an understanding of, a connective tissue between different mechanics in the game, right? Like maybe
Yeah,
you
yeah,
acquired a skill set in a tabletop game, and this monster is a true test of that skill to make sure that,
right.
you're
Yeah,
really
it's
pushing
so
it to its limits.
satisfying when you have the exact class feature that you need to deal with the
Yeah.
exact monster that's in front of you. Those are
Yeah.
moments that your players are going to remember forever.
Right.
And I should address usually it's at about this point in the conversation where someone brings up that, yeah, not every monster has to be this, though. Sometimes a monster can be just a monster. I've talked to game designers who like using robots for that. Just just catharsis. I just need to hit something, and so that I can get through whatever I need to get through. And I think that goes back to the idea of mechanics versus narrative monsters or villains. If what you're providing, if the experience you intend to provide in your game is just kind of a flow state or this or just a way to unwind after work and get your catharsis in, then yeah, maybe a mechanics villain is appropriate for that. And D&D has a bunch of them, a lot of low level mobs that you just see and are unremarkable. And there's an equal value, I think, in monsters that carry deeper meanings and teach you something about the world in which you live outside of the game. And I think the point of difference between them is, what does your player represent? With Dungeons and Dragons, it could be either or some combination of both, but you have the opportunity at the table to tailor the experience to who's there in the actual moment. With a game that you have to program or code or animate, you kind of have to do that work ahead of time so that everyone who comes into this game knows, this is what I was looking for, or at the very least, this is what I'm expecting, and the twist makes it worthwhile.
Right.
Shadow
Yeah.
of the Colossus would be a great example of that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, just kind of throwing in some of these other ones too. People were talking about turret views and reviews. Davros from Doctor Who
Yeah,
created
Davros from Doctor Who.
Yeah, created monsters that are Daleks. I always mispronounce that. The little machine monster guys. And he's also a
It's hard to
reflection of
pronounce it
science.
without a ring modulator.
Yeah. So he's a reflection of science gone wrong, which is an interesting,
Mm-hmm.
motif in that series.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned the sort of drinking game of monster theory. There is an academic study of monsters, a field of literary analysis devoted to monster studies, and its seminal essay was Jeffrey Jerome Cohen's Monster Culture 7 Theses, came out in 1996. So if you're playing the Monster Studies drinking game, now you take a shot. And one of his primary ideas, one of those 7 theses, was that a monster is a border guard. It is a harbinger of category crisis. So it is 2 things that should not go together: rationality and spirit, natural and unnatural, human and dead, man and machine. And a lot of the monsters that you see, anything that you can, any 2 things that shouldn't go together, you smush them together and you get a monster out of it.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too, because because what's asking the chat, like, what's your favorite monster? Kind of along those lines of like what doesn't fit together. As the artist 808 was saying, one of their favorite monsters are humans that lose their humanity. The tragic is compelling with the turn to abstraction, right? It's almost like it combining these things together, or things that shouldn't be put together, creates a whole new being of some sort or entity that creates like some sort of chaos, right?
That's every zombie ever made.
Right. and even then it's kind of funny, because like it's funny to see the evolution of, like, you talk about zombies, like, because they went from, oh my goodness, you have these heroes, these characters going through a zombie apocalypse, to zombie apocalypse is what? It's been done so many times. Let's have that environment. That be the challenge and the journey, but the real interesting tidbit are the people involved, where the people both are heroes and villains, right? So let's talk about the personal people in that. And I think that's interesting too, because like you said, it's hard to define what a monster is. What is a monster? What is a villain? Because it can change just depending on where the motivation is, right? I know Smiling Cat was talking about the Beast from the Magicians. Was another one.
Yeah, I think the first time he appears on screen, and what was who was that? Was it a Sci-Fi Channel? First time he appears on screen was the last episode of the Magicians that I watched, because he was just so unsettling and stomach turning.
I don't know if I've seen
a monster so effective that I stopped watching the show. I don't know, like, I don't want to. I hope you can take that as a compliment to your taste, because it was that rough.
Yeah. No, they had that. I mean, I watched. I forget what it was called. I think it was Jessica Jones, where they had the main villain.
The Purple Man.
Yeah, the Purple Man, which was like
fantastically performed by David Tennant.
Yeah, so much so it made me sad, because I really loved him in Doctor Who, and then I was like, no, he can't be a villain. But so it was interesting to see that, because they don't really show that character a lot until towards the end, and it becomes this accumulation of like, this is why this character is so villainous, so monstrous, so evil, right? And it's like what you said. It's like almost. It's never like. And why it almost designing monsters and villains have to kind of be done in forethought and the design of before you start just making the game. You kind of have to almost understand the character all the way through before you create the tabletop game, the digital game, the book, the story, because there's a lot that can be involved and little tidbits that you can showcase through that exploration. And that's what makes it powerful is you can be like, on the surface, they're a bad person, right? They're a bad monster. It's obvious what it is. You said kick the dog. They kicked the dog. But maybe when they're 8-year-old, they were thrown into a pit by their uncle in a pit full of ravenous dogs, and so they hate every dog, right? I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's justified, but it
does make sense.
describes who they are, right? Like why
Yeah,
they've
and
gotten
that's
that part.
I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of gave a justification for that as the stick, right? Like if you don't do this, somebody else will. But if you do this, you have the opportunity to make your game so much richer, and say so much more than it would have otherwise.
Yeah. Well, and that is an example of like personal experience, the definition, but I've also seen it in the sense of circumstantial definition. So I remember one of my favorite villains was in Wreck-It Ralph, and I'm sorry, a little bit of a spoiler, but basically you find this old game where the one of the guys there is like the top racer of this Candy Rush game, right? It's a race car game. And then you find out that later down the road he becomes this villain. Like it becomes obvious, like he's the one that's like trashing all this stuff and like forming all these issues with these races. And the gal there, I think it was Polly, she becomes what they considered a glitch in the video game, right? So you find out that it becomes a dangerous thing for other players. It can cause issues like, their lives are on the stake. And what happens is, on the outside, if there's a glitch in a video game, they get deleted. So this character, this villain, their circumstantial response was, if we don't take, this seriously, like, and get her out of this, game and scenario, she'll be deleted. So we have to do this thing which seems villainous, but it's for her protection. And you find out later that it was a ploy to do something entirely different. But for a while there, at the end, you felt like maybe he's not a villain. And I think that's one of the most interesting things you can do is like really push and play on that
Yeah.
idea of what's villainous and what's not, because you're like, shoot, like what is it? And that becomes that starts to amplify the other side of like, if this really is a trick, like that's really
well
messed
done.
up.
Yeah, one of my guests called it the pet the dog moment. Like he likes to have a moment in his games where the villain pets the dog or does something that makes you think maybe they're okay. And you have the luxury of doing that in a TTRPG. It's a fantastically inefficient form of playing games or telling stories. So you have the opportunity to flesh it out. I do want to call back to what's in the comments here. We've got Azathos is interesting. God is a monster. Is that coming from Persona 5?
Let me see.
Or just see if they're still listening.
Or
I'm assuming so because the next comment was about JRPGs. And this is one of those fantastic moments where I get to say, hey, Lovecraft is back.
Yeah, I was gonna
Because
say
Azathoth was
HP
a
Lovecraft.
part of the Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah,
I've interviewed I don't know, more than 50 people on this podcast, and at least a third of them, somewhere between a third and a half of them, mentioned Lovecraft at some point. He just keeps showing up.
Well, and that's why, I think it's one of those hard things is like it's part of culture at this point.
Yeah.
And it's why like I think you have to use the pattern a little bit. It's just going to happen. You can't really people want to reinvent the wheel, and you can. I mean, I think it's just kind of making that evolutionary jump where you know a little bit about like it's a little bit of what you know versus like adding some new twists to it, or perspectives. So yeah, I think like H.P. Lovecraft obviously is like integrated in so many ways. Um, and sometimes you get those little sparks of characters are like, I never even thought of that before. But they are rare, but I don't think they're necessarily like you need them to be entirely new. I know people are like, even when games are like, how do I make a brand new game? I'm like, don't worry about that. There's so much content out there. Even today on the stream, you said, oh wow, I never thought about that instinct character before, or monster, or animal, excuse me. And you've been writing the book for a year, right? So there's
Happens
always
all the
something.
time. Nothing will
Um,
make you feel more unoriginal than putting your idea on the internet.
yeah, let me see if there's some more things in here because there's a lot of really good nuggets in here. Nuclear Attack Wombat says my game master usually splits the intelligence. Some monsters are just large, hungry creatures, and those are great for one-off encounters. Yeah, that's what I was kind of saying too. Is like you always have like I almost want to call them just enemies, like you not to put them out
Yeah,
there,
not
but
to
like
muddy the waters.
goblins. You
Yeah.
just get a bunch of them. There's a horde of them. You're like, oh, these are easy to defeat or whatever.
Yeah.
But you kind of need them if only for like they could be like a breadcrumb trail of what's to come, or they could also
Yeah.
be a chance for you to demonstrate the mechanics of the game that you need to learn at a smaller level, but then amplify it at a larger level when you do find the villain or the monster later.
Yep.
So yeah, I think
Yeah, in a lot of games, if you haven't fought anybody in a while, you're probably going the wrong way.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's
I think my first experience with that was Tomb Raider back on the PS1, PS2. I don't know.
yeah. I think it was first
I
ones were
plugged it in and it
PS1.
went, oh.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. Lots of Lovecraft gods, Final Fantasy, Persona, Xenogears. Yeah, those all had all kinds of like godlike characters.
Yeah. Angel and demon are and monster are words that get mixed up more often in Japanese properties, it seems.
Yeah.
Again, not something I'm terribly qualified to explain, but it is interesting.
I'm just kind of reading some of these. They're talking about Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. Yeah, people love to as much as people like to see a fallen hero, they love to see a risen villain.
Well, that was interesting too, because I remember I call it my Dark Ages because when I watched all the way through. No, it was funny because I watched Breaking Bad. Have you ever seen that series?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the interesting thing about this that some of the creators were saying was an unintentional output of that is people were rooting for the villain. People were rooting for Mr. White.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you're supposed to dislike him. Like, although we can see why you may like him as a character, because you see him at first, he kind of had he had the bad hand, right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of how it started off as like a chemistry teacher turned to creating crystal meth and like meeting all these bad guys and actually doing well and showing like, he was able to turn the tides, maybe not in the most
Yeah.
culturally approved way. And I say it was my dark times because I would always watch it. My partner wouldn't want to watch it, so I'd do it when they're off, like at work or out for the weekend, and I would, eat not great trash food and just watch Breaking Bad because it was like some of it's just a train wreck, and so it is
Yeah.
interesting to watch, but it was
Well,
just
I think Breaking Bad comes up a lot, and I think
yeah,
that the creators of this show should have known, because one of the working definitions of hero that I get is the person who goes through the narrative progression of the story, like the person with the greatest emotional journey on screen or in the game or in the story or at the table. That's the hero.
yeah,
That's the person that we are supposed to connect with as the center of the story. So when they made a show about a villain and were shocked that, when they made a show about a villain and made him the center of it and showed him as having the greatest emotional
that's true.
progression over the course of the show, and then had the audacity to be surprised that people related to him as though he were the hero.
That was my interpretation. Is
Okay,
they were
okay.
just like, I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they did.
Yeah.
But there,
Maybe
I
that
think
was the point the whole time.
I think it was just how easy people were just like, yeah, I hope he gets everything he wants and everything is given to him like he's supposed to. And it was like, yeah, but you're also supposed to understand that what he did was wrong. And I don't know if people really thought that that was the thing, was like what he did was wrong. More
Yeah.
that the fact that he's getting what he needs is through all his work and efforts. Because it wasn't it, and that's the interesting thing. It took a lot of work and effort to
Mhm.
become a villain. And I think that's interesting too. Is it's not just like the villain, the good guy and the bad guy is an easy route. It's sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and I think that's interesting to talk about too. Is people just think that if you do hard work and dedication, you always become the hero of the story.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
that's not true. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes you do nothing and you get everything you want, or you become the hero, and you didn't have to do as much work, and then the villain's just sitting there on the sidelines like, look at everything I've done.
Yeah.
And then they destroy the world and ask why people think they're the villain, right? Because they're like,
Yeah.
and I think that's really interesting. There's another villain that I thought, well, I guess we can kind of get to some of this too, because this is something I want to bring up, because there's another villain type I want to talk about that I think is a really interesting villain you don't see a lot of, and may even not be considered a villain. But
All right, you have
but
piqued my interest.
well, it's yeah, you'll know it. The big cultural reason for religious groups like Judeo Christian God and JRPGs, and them being antagonist, enemies, bosses, etc., has to do with like Japanese experience with Christianity, which I think is interesting. It's the cultural
Yeah,
blend.
I should have been able to infer that from our conversation about Godzilla.
But that's interesting too. Is there's always this evolving conversation of
Yep.
like growing up with like, I know Godzilla. Like, well, do you know Godzilla when it was first created? Like
Yeah.
the time
Do you know
frame.
Rubber Suit Godzilla or
Right,
or Jurassic Park Godzilla?
and then you start to dive deep into it, and you've got like people like reinterpreting it like this is actually kind of what it represented, or maybe it didn't represent this, or reimagining it in a different way. Um, yeah, talking more about Walter White. Yeah, very relatable. That's the interesting thing, is a very relatable monster, right? Which is
One
funny
bad
because
day.
like, are you a monster, right? And that's the other question, is there's almost this polarity of like, am I a monster? Because I feel like they deserve to win. And it's kind of an interesting thing. Some characters will push away from that and pulling them further into a villainous role, right? And some will almost yeah, Hanna-Barbera Godzilla, yes.
Hanna-Barbera's Godzuki.
But yeah, I think that's interesting too. But yeah, I think the one I was thinking of that is a villain that most people will argue is or isn't a villain is from The Watchmen, the Ozymandias. I can never pronounce his name.
Oh, Ozymandias.
Yeah, Ozymandias. Yes, he
Yeah.
is one of my favorite characters because what he does is very logical. I would
Mm-hmm.
almost say it's what is best, like as pretty much a god, like what is best for humankind.
Yeah, and Ozymandias himself is sort of a really interesting mix of
It's called
associations and
Ozzy.
reinterpretations because he's kind of the Batman to Mr. Manhattan's Superman.
Right.
And then itself, I think he's drawn from, oh gosh, I wish I could remember the poet who wrote it, but that poem Ozymandias,
Yeah.
just incredibly compelling piece of literature, and a deliberate choice, I believe, on the part of Alan Moore to name his character after this kind of fallen ruler in a desolate landscape.
Well, and it's that kind of character type people I would almost argue would relate to like Thanos, right? Where it's like, I'm trying to save the
Yeah,
universe, but people see it as me just destroying half the entire universe, and they don't see
right.
it for
Yeah,
the greater
and
cause.
is Thanos a sort of a result of a greater amount of sensitivity on our part, or a greater sense of cultural literacy with movies and the language of and the language of superhero stories, or is it just like we got like have we? Does Thanos indicate a rising state of us as an audience that
I
we
don't
need a
know.
villain with
It's a
more
hard.
depth?
Well, because I mean, I don't know enough about cultural, backgrounds and whatever.
Yeah,
There's other different characters saying
can't
like
even imagine how I
Egyptian.
would begin to answer that question academically, but
Right, right, exactly. And that's the thing. I don't know that. That's not my background. But the thing is, like, I think it's an interesting talk because you will get polarizing conversations about
Yeah.
like, is Batman good or evil? Is Thanos doing the right thing or the wrong thing? Because of people's like backgrounds and upbringings, and they're all right and wrong at the same time, and it's hard to
Yeah.
understand that. It's hard to like interpret because our minds work really well when it says good versus evil, black and white, you know, tomato and tomato. Like those things
Yeah.
are like easy for us to consume, um, mentally and conversationally. And then when you say, yeah, but they did this, and you're like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would they? Why would that be a good thing? And I think
Right.
that's a hard
Yeah, and I
thing.
think it would be an incredibly difficult conversation if we talked literally about the math of it or about the sociology of it or the ecology of whether human population growth is unsustainable or even whether that's the issue itself. But we can all talk about Thanos because we've had that experience. We've seen all of these things codified into something that has a name and a big purple face
Yeah,
and a villainous plan. So that to me is the real power of what monsters do, is being able to put handles on our baggage.
yeah. Because I mean, and it's funny too. You get, well, not to dig into this, but you get political sides and everything and whatever, and those things are hard to describe because everybody's like, well, it's this and that, and you're like, but and they're hard to talk about because they're very personal, right?
And
You
very
are
real
attached,
and
yeah,
very very
and
hurtful to people in real ways.
so people kind of attach themselves to them because they are so personal that sometimes I feel like the conversation doesn't go as deep as it needs to. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it's like some things are attached to it. Called it like, this attached baggage. Whereas monsters and mythics and gods and things in their stories have a vessel to describe things that are in the abstract that allows us to kind of have an understanding, a scenario of their outcomes and what they mean to us. And I think, like you said, that's very, interesting and important, right? So, I love how this conversation's evolved.
This is what happens.
Yeah,
I've had this conversation like 60 times
yeah,
and it always ends up here, and that is why I
that's
keep
funny.
doing it.
Yeah, it's really, really funny. Well, and you're like, well, there could be something else out there, but there is a path to describing villains and monsters and whatnot. And I feel like we're slowly carving more and more into that as, an evolving culture. Uh, and I think it's just being open about the conversations because what we thought about as villains and monsters in our own world today is different today than it was 100 years ago, 20 years
Right.
ago, 10 years ago. And I think that's really interesting because, like, there's this core understanding of what a monster is. It's almost super clear to us on the outside shell. But then you dig deep into it and you're like, it really isn't, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and this is what I want to challenge every game maker with, is that every game you make, its antagonist becomes a rhetorical statement on what we value or don't. Every game you make is an opportunity to add the conversation, and you really have no way of knowing how impactful your statement that you've made through your game is going to be, or how long it will continue to be attached to the idea you've used. So there's a huge amount of responsibility with this, a huge amount of opportunity, and I hope a huge amount of joy in having the power and ability to add to conversations like this in this way.
yeah, it's a stimulating effect, or as we like to say in the game industry, it's for entertainment, right? So I think that
Entertainment, but not amusement.
right, exactly. Don't enjoy it.
Well, I mean, amusement literally means to not think, right?
Oh yeah,
Amuse
you're right.
from
Yes.
the Greek or Roman roots. I can tell you which, but yeah, entertainment, but not amusement.
Yes. That's really interesting. Yeah. Yes. See, there's some more, but I think we'll kind of taper this off a little bit because I think if there's more conversations, let's dive. I want to hear
Yeah,
everybody's
let's jump
voices.
over into the voice chat. I'll have this conversation all afternoon
Oh
if you
yeah.
want.
So some might say the hero's more death angle takes the good guy out of the equation, leaving the equation to a definition of bad
Bad
guy,
guy,
worse
guy.
guy, and trying to
Yeah.
determine which is which.
Yeah, I've got thoughts about that as it relates to D&D and Shadowrun and the
Yeah.
cyberpunk genre in general. So, love to get into that as well.
Cool. Well, let me go ahead and um, I'll grab the Discord link in here, and if you guys and gals and everyone in between wants to have a conversations about villains and heroes and who your favorites are, we will have that in our Discord channel. So I'll do a drop here. We're going to be in the general voice channel. So just kind of chime in there. Anybody can kind of stream and chat, just kind of like what we were doing. You can also say hi, to our speaker today and anybody else. And yeah, we'll see how the conversation goes. So I guess what I wanted to do is thank Lucas today for taking the time to do a presentation. I thought this was a really cool conversation, and I'd love to hear more. And yeah, if you
Yeah,
have
thanks, Wesley. It's been my pleasure to be here. If you want to know more about this, I've got a bunch of podcast episodes about it. The GM edition, the ones that are tagged with GM edition, go into this specifically.
Yeah.
And there's about 5 episodes now, and more on the way, about the Book of Extinction itself,
cool.
and how we do this act of mythologizing and making monsters out of things that used to exist. So, more to say, and I'd love to talk to you guys about it.
Awesome. Yeah, and what we'll do is, after the presentation, if you could send me the link to your book, any way to contact
Yeah,
you
of
if you
course.
want, and then your podcast, we'll put it up on our video feed here as well as in Discord and whatnot.
Beautiful.
And if people want to learn more and hear more, which I certainly do, I think there will be a lot of really good connecting pieces there. So cool. All right. Well, I think that calls it for today. So thanks everybody for coming out to the March Game Dev Meetup group. Again, as a reminder, we have our in-person events. If you weren't here in the beginning of the stream, we have our in-person events at the Idea Foundry next month for Prototype and Play, and for the Game Dev Meetup. Pending how things go, we're really pretty sure it's going to be all in person, but we'll make sure to let everybody know ahead of time. And all that information is on our meetup page. So if you type in the COGG, you'll find all our information there. So thanks for everybody coming out today. We'll see you guys in person as well as online. We still will continue our online sessions as well, and have a lot of fun. So join us in Discord if you can, and we'd love to talk to you. And if we don't, wish you the great rest of your weekend, and we'll catch everybody next time. So thanks everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.